Hello there, I am talking to you from Europe. Not only Europe, but Belgium. And not only Belgium, but Doel, D-O-E-L. Now, why Doel? Doel is a tiny, almost completely deserted village in the flatlands on the borders of the Scheldt River in Amsterdam on the southern side. It is the home to 4 Framatome nuclear reactors. Those reactors were supposed to be shut down, but they are not being shut down for another 10 years because their power is needed. Now, what is interesting is that instead of that, the people of Doel have been evacuated against, in the main, their will. There are still 20 people living in Doel, but it is an extraordinary place. It looks like a Western European Chernobyl without Chernobyl actually having happened. Deserted straight streets, deserted houses painted smartly in primary colors, yellows, greens, reds, a petrol pump without a hose to put the petrol in a car, and signs on the wall that say, there is music, there is poetry in these walls. And another sign, everybody deserves respect. Now, in the sky above Doel are the high voltage cables coming from the power plants. Up the road, when you look, you can see in our minds now always menacing domes of the 3 to 4 nuclear plants which are visible. The cooling towers tower into what was, when we were there, the blue sky, but it would have been much more depressing on a day in which the normal Belgian grisaille, that is drizzle and grayness, actually has sway. If you climb up the dike, because Doel is below the seawater level, you will see the brightly polished LNG tankers, green, red, and white, sliding over the surface of the sea. It is a place of immense symbolism. I met a lady with her 2 dogs, very friendly, refusing to go. Is Doel the symbol of the nuclear industry in Europe and in the elsewhere? Is it the end of the road? The answer is no. It is actually the beginning of an upturn. And it is about that I wish to tell you. Just to go backwards for a second in history, over the last 50 years, nuclear power reduced the advanced world's carbon emissions by more than 20%. So it was playing a very environmental role. But it got bad press. And that bad press has geopolitical significance. But first, let me look at the figures. The IEA says that nuclear power worldwide, which includes the developed and developing countries, is going to increase by 50% over the next 20 years. That is one hell of an increase. And you say, well, that's fine, but what about Europe? You're standing in Europe, you're blathering about Europe, what about it? Well, actually, Europe is even more interested. First, you have to remember that when Germany decided to shut down its nuclear reactors, en masse, all of them, which it has refused to reverse, though it has delayed as a decision, it did so because that genius of foresight, Angela Merkel, saw an opportunity in the Japanese nuclear disaster at Fukushima. She saw that as being a great opportunity to actually smash the Greens in Germany, because if she did what the Greens were proposing, then all the Greens would join the CDU. That's actually what happened. Now, if you look at the map today, the French, the Eastern Europeans, the Baltic states, and down south are all pro-nuclear power. There are only 102 reactors working in Germany, working in Europe today. Okay, but that is going to change. The planned, proposed, and reactors under construction today are nearly 40. The total increase in capacity would be 34%, and it would nearly all be happening in Eastern Europe. Now, why is that? It is because Eastern Europe got shafted worse than anywhere else by Russian energy. And the most geopolitically stable and environmentally friendly way out of that dilemma is nuclear. It is also, for places like Poland, the only way out of its high dependence on coal. So if you look at Eastern Europe today, then the total increase in planned, proposed, and under construction nuclear centers is 34. Now, that is a lot compared to the European average of 103 total reactors on stream. It would lead to nearly a 40% increase in the output of electricity from nuclear in Europe. Within that nutshell, there is another very important nutshell. The EU, of course, cannot take on Germany direct. It has taken on Germany direct, as NATO has taken on Germany direct, about the level and the lateness of its assistance to Ukraine. It is not going to go for another crisis about nuclear. It will simply ignore Germany. With the support of France, who already gets 70% of its power from nuclear and wants to get more. And therefore, what is going to happen is actually another chapter in what we have been talking about for some time, the decline of Germany as the powerhouse in the EU. It will no longer be calling the shots. Places like Poland, Bulgaria, the Baltic states, even Hungary, if it gets some sense into its head, are going to be calling the shots. And Germany is going to become weaker as a result of that. Now, the final point is, I think, really interesting, but rather arcane. And that is this. It's called the taxonomy of EU nomenclature to cover permissible nuclear power. Now, I always thought taxonomy was something that people who stuffed dead birds shamefully indulged themselves in, but no, not in this case. Taxonomy is actually the definition of what is acceptable, what is green, within a portfolio that either is funded by the European Union, and as you know, they're increasingly funding energy adaptation to get away from Russian fossil fuels. So this really sets out what can be included in portfolios which will attract money from the EU, from funds very similar and identical, actually, in most cases, with the New Generation Fund. And here's the good news. The taxonomy, as of a few weeks ago, now includes both natural gas and nuclear. So nuclear is now blessed, rather like the Pope canonizing a saint. Nuclear is now canonized as green. That will attract EU funds, but not only. That will attract lots of ESG funds from the private sector into nuclear and other forms of energy, which will then push it forward. I think that is something you want to think about. I hope you enjoyed this.